Okay, good afternoon. This is Kurt Greenbaum with Michael Dinan, former colleague of mine from Patch.com, now editor of NewCanaanite.com in New Canaan, Connecticut, right?
That's right.
And you've gotten a lot of, well, I guess I'd say you've gotten a lot of publicity for going out and striking out on your own and creating this site, and you've had some success with it, right?
Yeah, I think after the major layoff from Patch, there was a lot of attention paid to what some of us former editors were doing, and I was among those who decided to try striking out my own and developing my own local news site to cover a town.
And tell me a little bit about the process of getting that going and whether that was daunting, whether you felt like there were times when you weren't going to be able to make it.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I was really fighting for my life in a way. It was daunting. I'd never started a business before. I'd never managed a website before. I'd never been into the dashboard behind like a WordPress website. Starting out, I was on a free version of WordPress, and I had faced a couple of barriers to people taking me seriously. One was that I didn't have ads on the site at the very start. And two was that I had the word WordPress in my URL. I had to sign up with the web host and just get the newcanaanite.com URL. And what happened was within a few weeks of launch, I ran into a free WordPress theme called Blargo, which was built for independent news publishers and has an ad server built into it. So advertisers can get data about their ads' performance. Now that data is very advanced, and it really looks the way it looks now, which is like a professional news site. So that was a major step forward for me. I set up a newsletter within a few weeks. I had my social media platforms ready, and I really, the layoff happened on a Wednesday. That was January 29th, 2014. I launched the site on that Friday, and I started showing up to public meetings the next week.
That's amazing. And so I think I would assume that sort of on a local level, you were well known already. People in the community knew you, they knew what you were doing. And so seeing you migrate into a different platform to do this sort of thing probably wasn't a big surprise. But did you have difficulty with people's, inevitably you'd have to reach out to sources outside of the community to do some of these stories. Did you have a problem with people taking you seriously as a source?
Well, I really didn't have to reach out beyond the community to cover my town. It's just one town of about 20,000 people. I think it was important, and I got some good advice that, Mike, if you're going to do this, do it right away, because you're right. People knew me in the town from Patch. I grew up in this town. My brother lives here, and so I reached out to the highest elected official, and I ran the idea by him. He thought it was a good idea. I started talking to the local chamber of commerce, and I think you're right. I did sort of face a barrier in people taking me seriously for a while. That maybe lingered longer than it should have among some of the other local news publications. And but I think just being a good reporter, I established myself pretty quickly. I sold some ads within the first few months, very short ad runs as I was building up traffic. And then when I got to a point where I could give a really good return on an ad for an advertiser, so when I hit maybe 40,000 page views a month, then I started to get some of the bigger advertisers and tried to work longer term contracts, which I did within a few months. And I have to say, I was profitable within a year. I was able to for the first while, I was working doing some side jobs, freelance work. But within a couple of years, I'm in my office here, which I rent downtown. I earn a salary that's comparable with what I earned at Patch as a senior regional editor.
That's fantastic. So that was from January of 2014 until today. So that's 2.5 years now.
Right.
Uh, you've gone from zero to not only profitable, but able to support yourself exclusively on your income from newcanaanite.com.
That was true maybe a little more than a year into this endeavor. So I could not have kept up the pace where I started in terms of the website and building the business. For the first 6-9 months was really very demanding of my time and my energy. That was very tough. But there are a lot of things that you do when you do something like this. You do them once and never again. Setting up the site is one thing. Getting your first advertiser is a big deal. Getting a new advertiser is more time consuming than renewing an existing one. And so setting up the site, learning tools, getting certain plugins right. And then, as a reporter, and basically what I am as a reporter, just covering one town, learning the storylines, having sources, all of those things over time get better and better, and people come to you, you're more established, you do less legwork for better stories. And so it's just been hugely rewarding. I mean, I think I have the best job in journalism. I really do. I remember thinking when I was with Patch, and I was not a particularly good manager or subordinate or colleague, but I remember when I was SRO and SRE, a senior regional editor, I was really just covering this town of New Canaan, where I'm from. We sort of went through this process of losing staff, and we had holes in coverage. And I stepped in because we were just migrating to the new 2.0 platform, and I really wanted to understand what that was like day to day for our local editors. So I started covering this town, and I remember thinking at the time, geez, if I could just be the local editor if I won the lottery, I would just be the local editor for New Canaan Patch, and that would be the best job ever. And here I am, a couple years later, doing basically just that and working for myself. So I think it's exciting. I think I like I say, have the best job in journalism. I would not want to be doing something else. I wouldn't want to work for a larger market. For the whole life of news, the traditional career trajectory has been to go to a bigger market where there's more reach, larger circulation, more advertising revenue, a higher salary, more responsibility in terms of your beat coverage and what have you. I think that sort of is changing now with these tools like the free WordPress theme that I use called Blargo. MailChimp is very affordable for a newsletter. Social media tools like Facebook are free unless you want to put some money into using their advertising platform. So I think that whole model of what it means to be an experienced reporter and where you should be in your career is changing. You get to a point where I'm at, where I'm covering one town, and it used to be that sleepy towns like this, which only had a sort of 100-year-old weekly rag. Now the business opportunity is in towns like this for people like me.
So I just want to step back, and since this is for a class at Washington University, this conversation in the business of communications, and by communications, I'm talking specifically about journalism, communications outlets. That's what I want to try to focus on as much as possible in terms of because you're in the 3 semesters I've done this class, you're the first person like you that I've talked to, that I've had on in one of our conversations like this, who is striking it out alone and making it work as a business, and not just as a journalism enterprise. You're clearly able to cover the news, but not only are you able to cover the news, but you've been able to make a living at doing it.
Right.
And I think that's extraordinary. And I guess I wonder, do you think that's extraordinary? Because I know other people that are doing something like what you're doing, but they're not able to support themselves on it. And I'm wondering if
I recognize that it's I think I recognize that it's unusual for this field. From what I can see, I see people on some of these Facebook groups. There's independent news publisher groups, and I read stories sometimes about enterprises like mine, which are folding after many years, or people who have had to work second jobs. They sort of volunteer their time to do this type of thing for years. So I guess I have a sense that it's unusual to sort of make a go of it the way that I have. But I don't, be honest, Kurt, I don't spend a ton of time thinking about my wider industry. I just really want to get it right here in New Canaan, and with a job as a reporter, it can take up all your time, and especially with a site like the New Canaanite, where I'm doing not only the editorial coverage plan and execution, but I'm also doing the design, the development, the sales. I think I'm in a phase right now where I'm really working into a very sustainable work-life model. I'm there. I mean, I take 2-3 weeks vacation. I work 5 days a week. I don't know. Like I say, I pinch myself. It's come to a good place.
So yeah, you've referred to yourself as a reporter a couple of times, but obviously you're not just the reporter. You're the editor. You're the publisher. You're the chief marketing officer. So how long was it from that Friday in January of 2014 until the first nickel came in? And what did it take to get there?
Well, honestly, I opened up my business bank account with a $100 check from a local sporting goods store called Bob's Sports, which has been here since I was a kid. I'm 41 now. And it's been here for a long time. And the owner also doubles as the first selectman of this town. He was an early person who said, "I really believe in what you're doing." And I opened up my, so that was in like February. I mean, now when you start something like this, you're much more willing to go on a very short-term campaign with someone than I would be now. I sort of, at that point, anyone who wanted to pay for advertising, I jumped on it, whether it was 1 week or 1 month. Now I require either 6 or 12-month commitments from for-profit businesses. I can still go shorter term with nonprofits, but it was pretty quickly. Now, just getting $100 doesn't really pay any bills, but it was a flag planted on the site by a prominent business, and I think that's very helpful. My immediate plan after that, and this developed because I was going into these conversations with businesses where I was introducing myself and the website and talking about the value of advertising on the New Canaanite. And I came to the conclusion that what I would really want if I was this business, a prospective advertiser on the other side of the table, was I'd want to see certain businesses already advertising on New Canaanite. And I developed a short list of businesses that I knew I had to get. And I started conversations and focusing on them. One is a market and a wine shop. One is a car dealership. Both been here for 100 years. And another one was a bank. And I sort of targeted them and went after them to ease and facilitate those conversations with smaller, newer business owners. And that turned out to be a good strategy.
So in the Street Fight article, you talked about at the time you had 97 advertisers, 23 of which are on 6 or 12-month contracts. Is that strictly your business model? Display advertising,
100%.
banner advertising?
Yep, 100%.
And do you also run advertising? Forgive me, I don't get your newsletter. Do you run advertising in the newsletter too?
Yes.
And is that the same, or do when you sell an ad on the site, do they also get a placement in the newsletter, or how do you structure that?
I have 3 tiers of advertising on the site. The top tier includes visibility in the newsletter. I also have daily and weekly options for just doing the newsletter.
And how many subscribers do you have? Does that go out daily or 5 days a week, or how do you do that?
That's right, 5 days a week. I have 1,400 subscribers now. I get 1 or 2 a day. They're all local people. You can see from their email addresses who they are. It goes out through MailChimp. I pay $20 a month for that, given my subscription size right now. It goes up in $5 increments, I think, like every 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
MailChimp tells me that in media and publishing, the average open and click-through rates for a newsletter are 17.5 and 3.8. And our numbers are 65.5 and 31.2. So
just to clarify, a 65% open rate, meaning 65% of the people who receive it open your email.
Correct.
And then 30, how many?
31.2.
31.2% of those subscribers click on something in the newsletter.
Correct. 31.2 overall, including the people who don't open it.
Right. That's staggering. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a high rate. So what it tells you is, people read it every day. And I that's the thing I hear most of all. I start my day with you. I read it every day. And that's really where having the journalism background, one thing that's maybe comforting to know and that is worth saying out loud is that the news is still the most important thing. And having news judgment and being able to cover a town, identify a story identification and turning around a story, those are still the most important tools. What people like you and I learned in a newsroom, that still is the one thing that you need, no matter what the bells and whistles are, or what your site looks like, or whether how good you are at designing ads, or how good a salesperson you are. You need to start with that foundation of journalism.
Well, and it must be incredibly gratifying to have somebody like that sporting goods store very early on say essentially that to you. What you're doing is really important for this community, and it's important enough to me as a local business that I'm going to put my money where my mouth is.
Well, Rob, I sort of drafted an About Us section, which was kind of where I started. I said, well, what are we? What am I going to do? What am I going to cover? How do we describe ourselves? And I sent that to him, and he said, I think you have a lot of credibility here, probably more than you know, and I think it's a great idea. And then soon after that, he said, yeah, I want to be there. And that, that meant a lot to me. And that, I have to say too, having just been on the editorial side of the news for so long, and then putting myself out there as a business person, that was a growth experience for me, and starting to understand how important it is to have people on your side and rooting for you and the goodwill of people. That made me feel very much a part of this community in ways that I never felt before. And in some ways, I rediscovered my hometown through the New Canaanite in important ways. And I became part of a community in ways that my family, I personally never had been before. Now I'm on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm a member of the local Kiwanis Club. I sit on the steering committee for the high school internship program. I'm involved in ways that I never would have been had it not been for launching this business.
Well, so I guess I have to ask, because I'm curious, have you run into those occasions in a small town like this where you run into these people on the street where they might advertise with you, where then you might have to also turn around and write a story that isn't particularly flattering to that particular business for whatever reason? Has that ever come up at this point?
Not flattering for the business. No, I don't think so. But you're right in a way that towns this size, you run into the same people in different capacities. So, the car dealership I mentioned,
Carl's
Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Steve Carl is vice chairman of the town council, which is our local legislative body. Leo Carl is a former president of the Rotary Club, president of the Community Foundation, which is the major nonprofit in town. They sit on various boards. You run into people in different capacities, and he's also a business owner, and they're deeply involved in the town as a business. So I would say that it's true that not every story I've written about the town council maybe has pleased Every member of the town council, maybe Steve's one of them. The same probably goes for nonprofits, but it's really never an issue. That what I keep in mind is that my credibility with the reader is the most important thing. If I don't have that, then it doesn't serve any of my advertisers well, because it's going to turn off the readers. And so if a person is a subject in a story, or a company or organization they represent is a subject of a story, they have to understand, wearing their advertiser hat, that I need to be able to write fair and balanced news. And I've turned down people who wanted me to sort of, write about this business because they could advertise. I just don't do it. If it doesn't fit into my coverage plan, I don't do it. And I'm sure that I've turned off some prospective advertisers that way. But to be honest, I don't want those advertisers who expect that. That's a bad foot to get off on. They can go be difficult with another news outlet. I have the best advertisers. Just have a great relationship with them. They understand it. My job, I feel, is to put local readers in front of them, local prospective clients or customers, through news reporting. That's it. It's their job to have the right ad and to sell their products and services. That's really not my job. My job is just to put a prospective customer or client in front of their ad.
And I mentioned the 97 number that was in the Street Fight article. What's the number now? Can you share that?
Sure. I think if I click and open this, am I still on your camera here?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm just, right now I have 104 advertisers.
That's incredible. I mean, that's just staggering. Jeez.
Well, they're not all active, Kurt. So I have 104 people who So when I add an advertiser through Largo, they are logged in as an advertiser, whether they have an active campaign or not. So that's people who have come through. I would say you could just count the number of advertisers with active campaigns by looking through the site. Mm-hmm. But it's probably up over 30, and people come and go. I just had a guy from down the street here. He's a furniture maker. It's coming into holiday season, and he wanted to get a campaign up. He had a successful campaign on for a Father's Day sale, and he wanted to get another one up for a couple months. So with very small businesses, sole proprietorships like mine, I almost treat them, they would never be able to come on for 12 months and slog it out through July and August here. It's just not feasible for them. They don't have marketing budgets that size. Mm-hmm. To help them, I don't mean help them I would like for them to be able to use the site to help their business. And so it does, and I have to tell you one thing too, the platform I use is from a company called Broad Street. They developed Blargo. And when businesses advertise, part of the difficulty with online advertising has always been assessing the value of the readership. When a print product comes out and it's available at the local news agent, or it's delivered in a local zip code, a local business pretty much knows that the people thumbing through that print product who see or come upon their ad are geographically near. One of the difficulties with online has always been you really don't know where these readers are coming from, but that's changing. There are geolocating tools and satellite data where Google Analytics can tell you where your readers are. And when people interact with an ad, whether they click on it or hover over it with their mouse, my ad server can tell the advertiser exactly where that person is clicking from, who their internet service provider is, what time and day they're clicking on that ad. So they're getting a lot better information that helps them measure the value of an online ad campaign that they never had before. And for people like me, that's been very helpful because I just cover this town. I mean, the world ends at the town line. My two criteria for covering any story are, number one, a person would have to be connected strongly to New Canaan to want to read it, live here, work here, from here. Number two, it would look out of place on a news site covering any other town. So I don't do any localization. I don't cover regional stories. I don't cover the state legislature. We don't have county government in Connecticut, but if we did, I wouldn't cover it. So it's very local. I led the newsletter one day with an article about a baby possum that got into the dog run and at midday and escaped with its life. That was my big story. And if you're not from this town, what would you care about that? But it's the kind of thing that if you're sort of sidle up to the bank teller or someone waiting at the local grocery store, you might say, hey, did you hear about that baby possum that escaped? You know, that's that type of story. It's that type of news coverage.
And I think my earlier was about from time to time, I'm sure you have stories where there's a development or a retailer in town, but their ownership is outside of town, or they're a national company that is involved in business in the town somehow. So that's where my question about credibility with sources comes in. Do you ever have to make a phone call to national headquarters and they say, well, who the hell are you? That sort of thing.
I mean, I fearlessly reach out to people like I always would. It may not be good news, but even in stories where you're not developing good news, there's sometimes an opportunity for the subject of that story to say something. I mean, we just had a national chain, Mrs. Green's.
Yeah, I saw that story.
Yeah, I mean, so I went in there and on a tip, someone said, geez, they're out of stock on a lot of stuff. And I went in there and saw that, and they had a sign up that said, we have a delivery problem. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem right. And so I reached out to the company to confirm that they're not closing. And I got confirmation that, in fact, they are closing. And, I said, look, if you want to tell me you have any discounts or say a thank you to local customers, let them know where's the nearest Mrs. Green's after this one closes. There's an opportunity for them to sort of message through the article. And as I have to say, as a business owner myself now, and sort of understanding the emotional amplitude of starting a business and the difficulties that already exist in building a business and not wanting to invent new ones for anyone else, I have a lot more respect for small business owners and what it takes to survive and grow. And I can't write down the ways that changes the way I report, if it does at all. But I would say that I can speak their language in a way that I couldn't when I was an employee for someone else.
So I asked the students before each of these hangouts to send me questions in advance. And I think we've actually answered some of them already. Brendan, who's on the line now, had asked one about your profitability, and I think we've addressed that. He also wants to know how you use social media. His question is, do you still primarily use Facebook to build traffic, or has another social media platform become a better medium in the last few years?
Yeah, the short answer to that is Facebook remains the best social platform for me to get my stories out, build traffic, brand myself. There's nothing else that's even close, really, among social media platforms.
Here's one from one of my students, Gayla. Is there a person that you considered as a role model?
No.
Okay, simple enough. She also asks, is there anything that you do on a daily basis to ensure that you grow and develop in your career?
I think that the trauma of starting this and really putting myself out there is something that I should never really forget. I think it keeps me very grounded. If I could start every day and just put myself back in that time of early 2014, I'm a married person. My wife and I have a mortgage. We have dogs. We have expenses. It was not really, to sort of turn to your spouse and say, let me pursue my dream while you slog it out at this job you hate type of thing. That's a difficult, it's hard to pull off. And there was the difficulty of building traffic and branding the site and getting business and this sort of, and also, like I say, I felt like I was fighting for my life. I'm not a big joiner of groups. I really felt I didn't have a role model. There's no roadmap for doing this. And I guess I felt like I was very much on my own, and I couldn't imagine going back to a job with a boss. And most relationships with supervisors, for me, I don't know if it's my personality or just the specifics of my jobs, but they didn't end, particularly well. And I just had this vision of starting this website and covering this town and making it work. And I pursued it relentlessly and worked at a pace that I never had worked at before. And I was already a hardworking guy. And I think to remember that period of time, that critical period of time is important for me, to sort of remember how it started and why it worked, and the support that I needed from people here in town, people to speak well of me, people to send me a note saying, I like what you're doing. I mean, that could really lift my spirits and get me through an entire day. If someone who was on the fence about an ad campaign decided to hold off, that could ruin an entire day or week. And that's the delicate emotional balance you have in the early going of something like this. And you feel I felt very fortunate to be able to sort of forge ahead and build a solid business. It was important to put myself out there.
Well, it strikes me as I hear you talk about this that, you and I come from a news background, and we know very well what it takes to report a story, to edit a story, to write it, to do all of those things. But what you've had to do involves skills that are just completely different. I mean, yeah. How much of your day do you spend doing journalism? How much of your day do you spend doing accounting? How much of your day do you spend marketing the site? How much of your day do you spend selling, advertising?
Well, now, Kurt, it's like 97% journalism. I really don't go after advertisers. I kind of have my steady advertising base. I have a high retention rate, renewal rate. So that's important because, when you work and you get a paycheck, you sort of say, well, here's my salary and I know what my paycheck will be. But when you do this, you have people's contracts, and maybe they sign up for a year at a time. So they write you a check in March, and they won't write you another check until next March, maybe. And so you need to have some recurring revenue, and you need to manage your relationships with your customers well, check in,
Well, and see, let's touch on that, because I honestly find it, if you tell me you spend 97% of your day doing journalism, that's great. But you're right. You can't pick up the phone and call Carl's on March 1st and say, hey, thanks for your ad. See you next March.
But see, don't forget, I cover the town council.
Right.
And Steve Carl's the vice chair. So
right.
I put in the seat time and he sees me there, and you can work very efficiently because you might be talking about the infrastructure and utilities subcommittee agenda of the town council, and he's on that subcommittee, and it's sort of like, oh, by the way, how are things going? Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so there's that. There's also the technology helps because my advertisers get automated reports every week about ad performance, and those are branded New Canaanite. So that feels a little like hearing from me. I send group emails every couple months, maybe every month or two, with how things are going, if we reach a milestone on the site. I have a party every year for my advertisers, where I had a launch party in May of 2014, and now I have a party every November or December, and I barter with a local restaurant to get that done. And the advertisers are invited, and we get some FaceTime if they want to come. Otherwise, they're invited. Mm-hmm. I have a few barters set up. I mean, part of the way this really works well for me is I you know, I mean, we've had as many as 5 dogs, and that's a lot of, they're all 80, 90-pound dogs. That's a lot of dog food. I barter for my dog food with a local pet shop. That's $400 that I don't pay every month, $400 or $500. I barter for my home oil delivery. I live in a pretty cold part of the world. There's a local home oil provider who wanted to advertise, and off we go. I barter for my coffee. I barter for different things. So this is the money that you would spend on X. Now your bills are reduced, even if you're not seeing a check, so to speak.
That changes the business model. So it is an advertising-based business model, but it's not just, you know, content for money. It's, you're also bartering. So
when I think about home oil and dog food, and it sounds, you know, silly, but the truth is that could be $1,000 a month in the winter between those 2 bills. And so think about that. I pay a flat fee for my ad server on New Canaanite. So adding a new advertiser doesn't necessarily change the expense on my end beyond the time I might spend in that relationship management, which is pretty minimal because, like I say, I run into these people anyway.
All right, that's great. Let's get back to journalism for a second here. So I have another student, Dawn, who refers to some sentences in your about section. Articles written for print must be presented differently for effective delivery to a computer, tablet, or iPhone. When did you come to that epiphany in your career?
In Patch. And, you know, Patch was an essential training ground, I think, for a lot of us. And we were newspaper refugees, and Patch, before Patch pulled back on its staffing, we were breaking ground and figuring things out in terms of news delivery to an online audience, what worked, what were people reading, what were they sharing, what is the pace of news consumption in towns of different sizes and different personalities? What are the storylines people are interested in? How should a newsletter be structured from stories 1 through 5 or what have you? So these were all things that Patch wrestled with and figured out, or I thought a lot about, and I know you did too, Kurt, when we were at Patch. And that was an essential. I never would have dreamed before Patch that I could be doing something like this. And the tools that I use, like Blargo, were not available at the time I joined Patch in 2010. In fact, Blargo was started, you know, in part by a former Patcher himself, John Crepesi.
Oh,
so,
know that.
So yeah, he's one of the founders of Broad Street. He's not there anymore, but I think that in a town like New Canaan, for instance, this part of Connecticut was the second part of the country that Patch launched. It started in northern New Jersey and then went to Fairfield County, Connecticut. And New Canaan got its Patch in the summer of 2009, and a very experienced reporter called Amy Jeffries launched it. And it was the first time that New Canaan had experienced not only online news, but daily news. They just had the weekly newspaper, which was 100 years old. And so not only did Amy and Patch have to figure out how to create an online news product that people would read and consume obsessively, but the readers also had to change their expectation of local news. And Patch did that, laid all that groundwork and expectation for people.
Mm-hmm. So Logan is another student. I think we addressed this question in regards to your business model. Has it helped that you're a local company when it comes to selling ads in your area? And I think we've covered that. But his next question we sort of covered, but I want to get back to it. Is the type of business model that you're using something that you think can be replicated elsewhere, or do you think that it's unique to the specific area where you live?
I think 100% it can be replicated elsewhere. It won't look the same because each town is very different, but there are some guiding principles that would hold, and it absolutely could be replicated elsewhere. I think, for example, one of the things I did early on was I needed to grow the site quickly. I had my severance from Patch, but I didn't have startup money, so to speak. I think they gave us a couple months pay, which is required, and I signed an NDA for like another 2 weeks worth of pay, and that's what I had. And I needed the site to go from zero traffic to a substantial amount of traffic to show value for an advertiser within a few months. And one of the ways I did that was through my newsletter. And I identified people in the community that I wanted to put the newsletter in front of. I wanted them, and the way I did it was I sort of pictured the conversations I wanted them to have. For example, oh, did you hear that such and such happened? No, I didn't hear that. Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Where did you read that? On the New Canaanite. Well, what's that? And then I thought about what type of content do I need to have on the site to answer that question in the way I want. So I identified people in the town that were chatterboxes and also involved in the community. Maybe they volunteer on a board or commission. They're a member of a service organization like Exchange Club, Rotary Club, Lions Club. They might be a business owner. They might be a youth sports parent. They might be all of those things. They probably volunteer on some nonprofit boards, but I knew who they were, and I needed to get the newsletter, and I had the content. I knew I had that down. I needed to get it in front of them, and then to let these conversations happen in the town and to watch the readership and the newsletter subscription rate grow. And that's exactly what happened. And I believe those people are identifiable in every community.
And I only wonder about that because I live in a town that is a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, that has been incorporated for 25 years now. I think it's 28 now. They had their 25th anniversary while we were still working at Patch. You're living in a town that I assume is more than 200 years old, and where people were born and raised and die. And I wonder if there's something different about that dynamic than a bedroom community outside of a city versus the sort of community that you're talking about, that you're working in.
Well, we're 100% a bedroom community. This is 40 minutes north of New York City. So it's a commuter town. It has a dedicated rail line that feeds into the city. I think that it's true. The way this town has been cut up it's been in place for many years. However, I would say there are still structures in government and the nonprofit world and the business world that exist in your town as well as mine. And the criteria for identifying the must-have businesses for your advertisers, for those early important anchor advertisers, might be a little different from mine. And the criteria for who are those people that we need to get in front of the newsletter might be a little different. But I would imagine there still is a type of person that it's important to get and a type of business that it's important to get on your site early on.
You said earlier you're not a joiner. Have you been involved at all in that local independent online news publishers organization, Lion Publishers?
No.
Have they ever asked you to get involved or to be a presenter?
Yes.
Or something like that?
Not to be a presenter. They asked me to join.
But no.
No, I looked at. I guess I technically and accidentally did apply. I just meant to log into the site to see what they offered, and they looked at it like an application, which I sort of said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that." I wanted to see whether they offered assistance in things like legal aid or media liability insurance, and I didn't find that. I used to be frustrated at Patch by some of the conversations and sort of pontificating about our field. It used to drive me crazy, to be honest. And I just am more of a, let me focus on this and solve whatever problems in front of me type of person. I am happy to talk about what I do, but I guess when I say I'm not a joiner, I find what I need from some of the Facebook groups that are out there. Broad Street has one. There are some independent news groups. There's a Patch alumni group some of us belong to. And I find that if I want to sort of jump in and ask a question, I can get my answer there. Otherwise, I just prefer to figure things out on my own. And I've been asked to, in fact, next March, I'll be giving a workshop through the College Media Association in New York City for their annual conference there. And then I speak to some news outlets that cover our field, and if they want to ask me how I'm doing, I'm happy to share that. I'm on Michelle's list. That sometimes is a generator for people to say, okay, well, this is a type of website that I might do, so let me reach out through this contact on Michelle's list. That's a popular one too.
I saw that you mentioned also, as a small business owner yourself, you have been a sponsor for events in the community.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that, what your strategy is there. How do you pay for that? We've obviously focused on money incoming, but how much money is outgoing on things like that?
I would put all of that under the heading of marketing, and I probably spend $2,000, $2,500 a year. I pick things very carefully. The big dollar items are, I sponsor a Little League team in the spring, my nephew's team. He's 11 now. So we get our names in the back of their jerseys, and off they go. And I sponsor a summer concert at our big town park. There's a Wednesday night summer concert series at our park, and I'm one of the sponsors of that. Those are about $500-600 each. So those are my big ticket items. And then I might jump in and sponsor a hole at a golf tournament for the Police Benevolent Association here. I will occasionally run a Facebook ad do a Facebook boost for $5, $10, or $20 maybe every month or so. So that'll come to a few $100s in a year. It's really, like I say, I pick those rather carefully. It's seasonal. I do the baseball in the spring. I do the concert in the summer. I'm sponsor we do this lamppost sponsor. You guys kind of get your name on a lamppost downtown for the holiday stroll in December. So that's another season I have covered. That's kind of how I look at it. And some of that stuff also is, I also sponsor in March, there's a St. Patrick's Day dinner, but I sponsor the Old Timers golf thing in the summer now I think about it. I look at it like if it's relationships that are important or organizations that hit a demographic that is important to me or that I just feel close to. It might be like my brother's on the board of the New Canaan Old Timers Association, which celebrates great athletes from New Canaan High School. And so I'm happy to, pony up and sponsor their golf outing, as a sponsor a hole. It's fine. It's one of those things that I feel like helps me give back. They give scholarships out. It's,
Well, I mean, what I really like about that, and what I really respect you for this, because you've talked about you are a small business owner too. And what you're saying to the community when you do that is, I'm not just a mercenary in here trying to suck what I need out of the community in order to put food on my table and news on my website. I'm a part of this community too.
Yeah.
And I think that probably does as much for your credibility as the news coverage does.
I just believe in doing that in a way that goes beyond, geez, I hope someone notices this. I mean, the other day I was buying my friend a cafetiere, a French press, and my first thought was, I wonder if they sell those downstairs at Design Solutions, which is a business that is in a 6-month ad campaign with me right now. So I called them to find out. They didn't. But before I marched off to Bed Bath & Beyond or wherever, I certainly found out what my options were in town. I mean, I just feel like if there's something that you have to get or you have to buy it locally or buy it with a business partner. Do business with each other. I mean, that just makes sense to me. We, in a town like this, in order for small businesses to survive, we have to do business with each other. We have to pay attention to each other and consciously go and shop here, eat there, spend money. I know the next car I get will be a Chevrolet. It's just a question of what model. I 100% know that. Mm-hmm. And by the time my Honda conks out, Carl Chevrolet will have been advertising on New Canaanite for 4 or 5 years and probably paid for the cost of the car already. So I just know that. That's something I believe in.
I mean, what we're talking about here is your business model is advertising, but really what your business model is relationships and creating relationships in so many different ways.
And it's and the news, it also helps you on the news side because now you are a trusted member of the community and a stakeholder in the community. And people know that if they have difficult news or if they have other types of news, just newsy news, that you're one place to share it. You've engendered goodwill, and people read your site. And what I'm hearing now is the new thing I'm starting to hear is people say is you don't have to read anything except for New Canaanite. I mean, that really wasn't the case for the couple years I started. It was, I read a little of this and I get my news from here and here and here. And now people are saying I just read the New Canaanite.
All right. I got 2 more questions for you, and I think we will have come to the end of our hour, which, again, I'm so grateful for you taking the time with us here, Michael. So the first question, I guess, goes back to the advertisers, and how do you measure their happiness? You said that you have really great tools from this WordPress theme that sends automated reports to them. How do you know they're happy? What did they look at, and what did they tell you? Well,
the one obvious way would be someone says, I saw you're out on New Canaanite, and that's why I'm here shopping your store. And that has happened. Someone might not be 100% sure. I had a realtor who got a client on the home seeking side, not a listing, but someone who wanted to buy in town, who came to them through the New Canaanite too. They saw their ad on the New Canaanite and clicked through and read up on them and came through. So sometimes it's as direct as that. What I would say to you is because these people are owning businesses, living here, volunteering on boards of nonprofit organizations, coaching a youth soccer or baseball team, there's another part of this, which is my job is to have people just obsessed with reading New Canaanite and getting their news there, which they do. And I know how to report a town and get stories exclusively, and they're good hard news stories. I have good news judgment. So I have that. Now, one of the conversations that happens out there is, geez, I've got this fundraiser coming up, or my kid's 9 and under soccer team has made it to the finals of the, geez, how do I get news coverage? And then it becomes a thing to know Mike. Well, geez, I know Mike on New Canaanite. I have a relationship. I'm a longtime advertiser, or I'm a whatever. Can you get me on the New Canaanite? That's something people say. And that's another thing in a town this size that has value for an advertiser or someone else. So sure, I'll let you upload your event, your tag sale, your whatever, your fundraiser, and I'll put you in my event section in the newsletter. Of course I will. And so there's some currency there. Because I'm doing my job as a news reporter well, there's some currency there and a reason to renew. and a reason to keep this relationship going.
Well, you've geniusly segued into the last question I wanted to ask you, which was, you know, you're basically the newsroom. I saw that you have interns from time to time. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. But I'm also interested in how do you get contributions from people in the community? We were very big at Patch about encouraging bloggers. Is there anything like that you do?
So I have interns. There's a program here which many high schools have, where for the last month of their senior year, a student can take an internship at a local business rather than go to class. So I host 2 interns each year through that. I'm also on the committee that runs that program. And then for my first summer, I launched a summer internship program. I had 4 steady interns last summer. I had 1 my first summer. It's an unpaid internship. It's sponsored by the local Baskin Robbins, which means that the kids get a free ice cream card. They eat free ice cream all summer. I pay their expenses, or offer to. They often don't file for them. And, you know, it's a learning experience for them. I think it's being tweaked as I go. I think if my 3 outstanding interns from last summer return this summer, there'll be a chance for them to make money. I would have them develop and sell a back-to-school guide. I just know I would do that. I had a holiday guide last year, and so I have an idea of how to do it. And I'll have them do a back-to-school guide next summer. So that's that part of your question. The other part of your question was what?
Outside contributors.
Oh, yeah, no. The short answer is no. My newsletter, I have usually 4 items per day per weekday. So that's 20 items per week. So I have a pretty high standard for making that. I think the reader experience is undermined by equivocating a reported hard news story with a contribution about a promotion at a local business or whatever that announcement will be. So I have a weekly feature called Did You Hear, where a lot of this stuff goes into that feature. You can see it right now. I have a gallery, and what people contribute might go into the caption in the photo gallery. It's little bits of news that wouldn't necessarily merit a standalone story. Some of them are relegated to that feature, which is very popular. But outside of letters to the editor from local people about local stuff, the answer is really no. I mean, I spend probably about $1,500, $2,000 a year on freelance soliciting articles for nights when I just absolutely have to cover 2 things and they're happening at the same time, or for when I'm on vacation. So no. And the reason no, and the reason I'm not an open platform that way, is because what I'm delivering in my newsletter, and the reason I have such high open and click-through rates, is because this is quality hard news that's originally reported, that's important to people. And the people who just want to contribute something aren't really in a position to produce that.
Okay. Well, this was great. Is there anything that you thought I was going to ask you that I didn't, that you want to address?
You were pretty thorough.
All right, great. Well, Michael, again, super grateful for you spending some time with us today.
Sure.
As I mentioned in our correspondence, there's Brendan chiming in with a thank you.
Oh, sure.
And I know the students get a lot out of these. The ones that can't be in this live event as it's happening are required to watch the video later. So
okay,
your time is well spent. And I'll send you a link to it when it's up on YouTube.
Okay. All right, Kurt. Thank you.
Take care, and thanks again. Have a good weekend.
All right. All the best.
Bye-bye.